Welcome to today's episode. We're diving into the Nepal Human Rights Yearbook 2025. Quite a comprehensive report, lots to unpack.
Absolutely. It's fascinating to see how the human rights landscape in Nepal is evolving. Where do you want to start?
Maybe with the overall picture, the report highlights progress but also persistent issues, right?
Yeah, there's a mix of optimism and concern. For instance, political instability still impacts rights protection. Did you notice how they stressed political accountability?
I did. It seems political leaders often promise reforms, but implementation lags. That's not unique to Nepal, but it's certainly prominent.
The report also emphasizes the importance of an independent judiciary. But there are concerns about interference, aren't there?
Right. The judiciary is supposed to be a check on power, but when it's influenced by politics, justice can get compromised.
On the flip side, there's been some positive movement. The report mentions improvements in freedom of expression. Journalists face fewer threats than before.
That's encouraging, although it's not all rosy. There are still cases of intimidation, especially in rural areas.
True. And speaking of rural areas, the chapter on marginalized communities really struck me. Discrimination remains a huge challenge.
Especially for Dalits and indigenous groups. Access to healthcare, education, and basic services is still unequal.
Yes, the statistics were quite stark. For example, school attendance among Dalit children is significantly lower.
And child marriage too. The report says it's declining, but the numbers are still high in some regions.
That's worrying. Early marriage often leads to a cycle of poverty and limits opportunities, especially for girls.
The government has launched programs, but cultural attitudes are hard to shift. Laws alone aren't enough.
Absolutely. I liked how the report stressed community engagement. Change needs to come from within, not just from above.
Let's talk about gender-based violence. The report dedicates a whole section to it.
Yes, and for good reason. Cases of domestic violence, sexual harassment, and trafficking remain pressing issues.
The statistics on trafficking were shocking. Hundreds of women and children are trafficked each year.
The border with India seems to be a major problem area. It's so porous, making monitoring tough.
Law enforcement is often under-resourced. Plus, there's sometimes a lack of sensitivity in handling victims.
The report calls for better training for police. It also highlights the role of NGOs in supporting survivors.
NGOs are doing incredible work, but they can't do it all. The state needs to step up.
Exactly. One interesting point was about migrant workers. Many Nepalese work abroad, and their rights aren't always protected.
Remittances are vital to Nepal's economy, but migrant workers often face exploitation and abuse.
The report mentions some recent bilateral agreements to protect workers. Still, enforcement is tricky when the abuse happens outside Nepal.
And families back home are affected too. Sometimes workers disappear or return with trauma.
There's a call for better pre-departure training and legal support for migrants. That seems essential.
Shifting gears a bit, the environment chapter was eye-opening. Climate change is hitting Nepal hard.
Floods, landslides, and droughts are becoming more frequent. The report links this to the right to housing and food.
It's all connected. When crops fail, people's health and livelihood suffer.
And marginalized communities are hit hardest. They have fewer resources to adapt.
I also noticed the report section on the right to health, especially during the COVID-19 pandemic.
Healthcare access was a big challenge. Rural health posts lack basic supplies and staff.
Vaccine distribution was uneven too. Urban areas fared better than remote villages.
But there were some innovative responses, like mobile clinics. Those made a difference.
The report mentions mental health too. Stigma remains a barrier, but awareness is rising.
It's good to see mental health being discussed. For a long time, it was almost taboo.
Education is another area of concern. The pandemic caused major disruptions.
School closures hit poor families hardest. Many students lacked internet or devices for online learning.
The digital divide is real. When education moves online, who gets left behind?
Exactly. The report suggests investing in infrastructure and teacher training.
And not just for technology, teacher quality overall affects learning outcomes.
There's also a section on children's rights. Child labor is still a problem in some sectors.
Especially in brick kilns and agriculture, poverty drives families to send kids to work.
The government has laws against it, but enforcement is patchy.
I like the personal stories included in the report. They add a human face to the data.
Stories can be powerful. Numbers tell one part of the story, but real lives drive the message home.
On the international front, Nepal's engagement with UN bodies seems to be increasing.
Yes, But the report notes some recommendations haven't been fully implemented yet.
Implementation seems to be a recurring theme. Policies exist, but follow-through is uneven.
That's a challenge many countries face. But Nepal's federal structure adds extra complexity.
Decentralization is supposed to bring services closer to people, but coordination is tough.
Especially when local governments lack capacity or resources.
The report also discusses transitional justice, the need to address conflict-era abuses.
Victims are still waiting for truth and reparations. It's been a long process.
The Truth and Reconciliation Commission's progress has been slow.
Political will seems to be lacking. Addressing the past is always sensitive.
But without justice, wounds remain open. It's essential for lasting peace.
Agreed. Another point that caught my eye was disability rights.
Yeah, people with disabilities face many barriers: physical access, stigma, lack of services.
The report calls for more inclusive policies and better infrastructure.
Small changes can make a big difference, like ramps, accessible transport, sign language interpreters.
Sometimes I think we underestimate how much inclusion benefits everyone.
Absolutely. An accessible society is a better society.
Looking ahead, the report offers recommendations. What stood out to you?
For me, the emphasis on civic education is key. People need to know their rights to claim them.
And the call for stronger institutions. Independent, well-resourced, and accountable.
Building trust in institutions is crucial. Without it, rights protections are just words on paper.
The report ends on a hopeful note, but also a call to action.
I think that's the right tone. Change is possible, but it takes effort from everyone.
As listeners, maybe we can reflect on how human rights issues in Nepal echo in our own communities.
Great point. Rights aren't abstract, they shape everyday lives.
So as we wrap up, what's one thing you'll take away from the report?
For me, it's the reminder that progress is possible but never guaranteed. We have to keep pushing.
I agree. And that every voice, no matter how small, can make a difference.
Thanks for joining us today. Keep questioning, keep caring, and keep the conversation going.
See you next time, and don't forget, human rights matter everywhere.